Greetings to everybody present here today. I am proud and honored today to welcome among us Shadab Zeest Hashmi, poet, essayist, and the editor and award-winning writer who needs no introduction to the word of letter. On behalf of the management of Karim City College, Jamshedpur, I express my deep gratitude to her for taking time out of to talk to our students and share her love of reading and writing with them. Writer Beyond Distance is an initiative of the Department of English, Karim City College, which intends to open the door of creativity for our students by introducing them to fertile minds across the globe. In earlier events of this series, the department has welcomed national and international repute resource person. Today, Shadab Zeest Hashmi in the series of the lecture of Writer Beyond Distance, and we are all eagerly looking forward to a wonderful lecture. I also take this opportunity to congratulate the Department of English, particularly Dr. S.M. Yahya Ibrahim, Head of the Department of English, Dr. Basudra Roy, Dr. Neha Tiwari, Professor A.K. Das, Professor Saket Kumar for organizing this program and for bringing the words of such an admirable academics to us. To the departments, its students, its faculty members for dynamic learning session ahead. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a warm welcome. Now moving on, I would like to request Shreya Guha to please come forward and invite today's honorable guest with all of us today. Over to you, Shreya.
Thank you so much, Anjali. It is an honor to introduce her. Shadab Zeest Hashmi, a Pakistani-American poet and essayist, is the winner of the San Diego Book Award, Sable's Hybrid Prize, and the Nazim Hikmat Poetry Prize, and has been nominated for the Pushpa multiple times.
Shreya is not
I think there is an audio glitch. Shreya, we can't hear you. If you could please fix it.
Am I audible now?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you are audible.
Shreya, you continue.
Okay. I'm so sorry for the glitch. Shadab Zeest Hashmi, a Pakistani-American poet and essayist, is the winner of San Diego Book Award, Sable's Hybrid Book Prize, and the Nazim Hikmat Poetry Prize, and has been nominated for Pushpa multiple times. Her poetry collections include Kolacha and The Baker of Tarifa. Her book, Ghazal Cosmopolitan, is a work of critical essays, lyric essays, and original ghazals and qasidas. Her latest book, Qom, is a hybrid memoir about childhood in Peshawar, the Pakistani city along the border with Afghanistan during the time of the Soviet War. Zeest Hashmi's poetry has been translated into Spanish, Turkish, Bosnian, and Urdu, and has appeared in numerous anthologies and journals worldwide. Most recently in Max Twain's In the Shape of a Human Body, I Am Visiting the Earth. She has taught in the MFA program at San Diego State University as a writer in residence, and her work has been included in the language arts curriculum for grades 7 to 12 Asian American and Pacific Islander women poets, as well as college courses in creative writing and humanities. We are very privileged to have you among us, ma'am. This session is all yours now.
Assalamu alaikum, adab. Good evening if you're in California. Good morning if you are in India, South Asia. Thank you so very much, Dr. Yahya Ibrahim, for inviting me to speak. And thank you, Dr. Riaz, for your kind words. It's wonderful to see Anisur Rahman Sahib. Thank you, Anjali and Shreya, for your introductions. This was really a very warm welcome. So thank you very much. I'm very honored to be with you. I'm going to deliver my talk, but then I'm also going to share some poems. Please do let me know. I'm going to keep it conversational, and I'm going to ask you how we're doing time-wise. Yeah, yes, up. So if we're all ready. So my talk is called Song of Many Combs and a Single Mirror. 7 weeks before my wedding day, half my face became paralyzed. No matter how much I willed my face into a smile or frown, half my face remained creaseless, still as stone. It was an attack of facial palsy, resulting likely from a viral infection. There was no cure. My bridal jewelry had arrived that week, and my mother wanted me to try it on. There I sat at her dressing table, holding a paisley medallion of rubies and gold that sits on the forehead, hanging from a string of small beads. This tika, a traditional bride's jewel, which you're all familiar with, really my favorite of all the pieces, is crafted as a centerpiece, shimmering on the forehead where the mystic inner eye resides, the noblest part of the head we prostrate in Muslim prayer. To me, on the eve of separation from my parental home, the tika was symbolic of selfhood, of a refinement of perception or the aspiration thereof, in preparation to take on life as an independent adult. Now, as I held it up to my forehead, it divided my face into two. One, animated with emotion, tremulous, the other completely detached and motionless. Facial symmetry is not a matter of deliberation or consciousness. It is simply subordinate to a particular neurological subsystem, one that was malfunctioning. When I cried, tears came from only one eye. In the days that followed, my mother gave me saffron tea and vitamins, taught me face yoga, took me for therapy at the Army Hospital in Peshawar, where they tried to wake up my muscles by giving small electric shocks to the affected side of my face. When the physiotherapist, dressed in his military uniform, heard that my wedding was just around the corner, he was visibly saddened, and he told me in the kindest voice to not give up. Seeing myself in the mirror, split in half, was one thing, but being unable to form audible words with my partially immovable mouth while teaching creative writing, a course that continued up until a fortnight before marriage, was even more painful. Talking to my students about coaxing the spirit and polishing the craft led me to consider the poignant dynamics between voice and visibility, authority, work, worth, spirit, silencing, and invisibility. Fortunately, by our wedding day, the palsy resolved. The face in the ceremonial RC Masa for mirror showing to the bride and groom was whole, but the memory of my split face became an emblem for my new existence. I saw that I had become split by marriage, migration, and later childbirth, multiple citizenships, and contrary attachments in a time of war. More importantly, I saw that being split is a human condition, that we are all made of pieces, hungering to become whole, like the dazzling shards of a sheesh mahal ceiling. And that it is not only possible to carry contradictory parts within and find beauty in unresolved spaces, but the burns from their friction make for an intellectually and spiritually challenging and robust existence. In my latest book, Comb, a hybrid memoir, I say, from the cusp dividing countries and tongues, and from the cusp of divided selves, I write. My first book, Baker of Tarifa, reimagined a time and place defined by cusps, but also by legendary collaborations, where the three Abrahamic peoples and three continents came together in a civilizational efflorescence so great that it became known as a golden age, a bridge between antiquity and modernity. This was the story of Al-Andalus, or Muslim Spain, that I wrote as a series of poems in the voices of figures, historical and fictional, living in different eras of a near millennium of la convivencia, or peaceful coexistence in Spain under Muslim rule. Each of these characters in the book, philosophers, calligraphers, gardeners, governors, seamstresses, scribes, carries fissured multiplicities within that make them transcendent, releasing them from their period of history and making them relevant to us. The central metaphor of the book, baking bread in a farn, Arabic term for a communal oven, pays homage to the idea of welcoming diversity. These neighborhood ovens were used to bake dough made in homes of Muslims, Jews, Christians, and others for centuries. And to me, they are a symbol of disparate parts coming together to form a peaceable whole. Whereas the cusp represents fissures in personal identity as well as political conflicts and territorial borders between countries, cosmopolitanism in its truest spirit allows us to accept all in one space, despite some irreconcilable differences. I find in the fissured couplets of the ghazal form a marvelous example of generosity of spirit and intellectual dexterity. As I state in my book, Ghazal Cosmopolitan, the ghazal in its structure as well as its sensibility not only allows contraries to cohabit, but in the best compositions, it makes a demand to frame polarity in the same space. You're all familiar with the ghazal form, very much so. Once the matla, the opening couplet, introduces the refrain or redif, the reader expects two things. One, that each successive couplet will be locked in by the same phrase, word, image of the redif, and two, that a wild freedom of perspective will be offered like a new puzzle piece that astonishes by fitting the given redif as perfectly as the previous one. The ghazal fuses the old with the new, the friend with the stranger, reflecting, refracting, building its sheesh mahal of couplets that shine their own light, but are even more resplendent when seen as a whole. Researching and reflecting on history has taught me that the clash of civilizations narrative that was gaining currency in my college years in the US, as well as the new puritanical movements of Muslims that created divides, were dangerously misguided and have resulted in decades of violence and war. Without a doubt, I have suffered distress as a Muslim, especially as a mother of young children, not only from the global climate of war, but also the devastating tensions arising from legitimized hate speech. I write about Islamophobia mostly in my book, Coal and Chalk, and I'll be reading some poems from Coal and Chalk today, contextualizing the historic shifts in global power that I have witnessed, trying not to lose sight of the suffering of others all around us. Coal and Chalk is a series of autobiographical poems that critique the us or them mindset, the tragic loss of nuance in global discourse. The cusps in this case are the unfortunate boundary walls built high as prisons of the mind and soul, but also are teachable, beautiful scars. In my new memoir, Qom, I revisit my childhood in Peshawar, a frontier city, a city on the cusp of empires. I recall the sights, sounds, and stories of daily life in Qom, but also touch upon the geopolitical conflicts of the Khyber region as the great threshold of South Asia, the cultures of encounter it fostered over thousands of years, and the impression that its mythos made on me as a budding poet. Mirror gazing, I've learned, gives only a reflection, a reductive story, not the whole story, as in the case of my palsied face. And yet, in its truth-telling, shadowed by enigmas, there are compelling seductions to unravel the whole truth. To use the metaphor of combs and combing from my book, I believe there is much to be gained from bringing the fragmentation within and without into clearer focus by combing through our unique histories, combing through both the traumas of the past and the cherished traditions, finding the best of our cultural heritage, and then to calibrate our goals as participants of the larger world in order to nurture the possibility of a better future. In the past year, throughout which each of us has battled the ravages of the pandemic in one way or another, the urgency of sharing responsibility has become even more apparent. If poetry wields any power, it lies in summoning the imagination to expand empathy. Poetry may disarm us so that we ultimately wish for others what we wish for ourselves. It may make the cusps between us luminous with genuine humanity. And I'm going to end with a share from a ghazal by Allama Iqbal. And it goes something like, फिर बादे बहार आए इकबाल गजल खां हो, फिर बादे बहार आए इकबाल गजल खां हो, गुंचा है तो गुल हो, गुल है to Gulistan ho. And I'm going to translate it in English. May the spring breeze blow again. May Iqbal offer a ghazal. If a bud, may it be a rose. If a rose, may it be a rose garden. So with your permission, I'm going to move on to the poetry reading. And I'm going to begin with the Qasida. And before I read the Qasida, I'll read a little bit about the Qasida that I'm about to read. This Qasida is in 5 parts, and it's called the Qasida of Urdu. And one of the things that I didn't mention that I wanted to, if I had more time, I would have talked about my love for Urdu, and particularly Urdu's the pluralism and the humanity that I find in how this hybrid language came together and has developed over the years. So I'm going to read a little bit, a little note about the Qasida before I read the Qasida. The Qasida is a poetic form that comes from the ancient Arabic oral tradition and became part of many literary traditions, including that of Urdu. It was originally a journey poem, typically 50 lines or more, and included various prescribed themes which were framed in distinct segments or movements. The Qasida cycle is, my Qasida cycle is called Urdu, is a journey poem, an adaptation of the original form. So it's obviously not written in exactly the way that the original was written. So it's adapted. And my big influence in Qasida poems is Lorca, the Spanish poet Lorca. So it celebrates the various roots of my native language, Urdu, which is a hybrid of Turkic dialects, Arabic, Sanskrit, and Persian, cultures along the Silk Roads. The poem begins in Koh-i-Kaf, or the Caucasus Mountains, a place that is mythologized in Alif Laila or the Arabian Nights. We're all familiar with the stories of Alif Laila, and ends in Delhi's Urdu Bazaar, the multilingual district of Imperial Delhi, where Urdu evolved into a language. Okay, so you'll hear different titles that go with each segment of the Qasida, and each segment is 10 lines long. So in some ways, I'm still following the original Qasida. Okay. Qasida of cat dreaming the forbidden mountain. Daybreak, a mist-filled coin purse from the Caucasus, or Koh-e-Qaf, mountain named after the letter tied to the throat's sharp rock of death. Rouged floor, golden fleece hung on the arm of the Greek god of war. Gray breath lifting from a chokehold between a horned dev and a Persian wrestler. Princess dressed as a horseman, held in the dreaming cranium of a cat on a rich cushion beside the half-read Alif Laila. Qasida of Urdu by the Black Sea. This is the place called Urdu, which is in today's Turkey. How the Black Sea is an iridescent dish, the soldiers know from clutching each brother by the echo of his gleaming song. Nothing is lost on the edge of myth. Camp to camp, ear to ear, tongue unknotting on sailor songs in the direction of saffron and science. Oh, how she makes a fire, how he washes her scarf. In the world's oldest cherry orchards, they hum to the oldest military march, raising a drum against untimely burial. They feed the anthem to woodworms. Qasida of Mulberry Sisters. Silk semantic from a mile of thread each cocoon makes. You are prized company under an unknown grove, sisters, plaiting language from 3 continents on patches of camel thorn, hard meadow grass, a sofa, Turkish for chair, from suffa or wool in Arabic. Mirror work of court Urdu, camp Urdu, pass on the purple stained saucer where a word once met a word, pass on the newborn, spring anemones, asphodels, the book we ride of thread known for strength and shine. So this is really an homage to the Silk Road, and the Mulberry Sisters are just the cultures that grew along the Silk Road. And so this next one is called Qasida of the Listening Loom, and this is in praise of the weaving skills and of course the songs that go with the weaving, and it's also an homage to Kashmir. 1,600 knots per square inch, silk on silk. Carpet weavers keep their windows to the street open for the footfall of pilgrims. Tamasha tambourines, salty pastry, coal and tea hawkers, school children, snow partridge and chakor. The loom must soak in every waking and sleeping syllable, for each restless knot to settle on this as the stew cooks all night. The scent of cloves sewn into the newlywed's pillow travels to a far continent where their carpets hang, where no one has heard of a place called Kashmir. Qasida of Urdu Bazaar. Between the mosque and the moonlight square or Chandni Chowk is the market where my language landed a name. I drank the map as milk, meandering, more than 100 years after the market charred on the watch of golden poets. Black lace trailing on volcanic ash, ancestral thunder where the Black Sea meets the Jamna. I turn my back to the mulch of master, sing language is its own empire. So I'm going to make a little shift in terms of theme. I'm going to read a couple of poems that are based on, they were written maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and they came out of my anguish about the drone wars. And the poem I'm about to read is called The Smallest Drone, and it's based on these lines that I came across while I was trying to research the olfactory sense. So I came across some information about these drones that are smelling drones. And so they smell chemical weapons, that they're used to find dead bodies in the rubble, and so on and so forth. So these were the smelling drones that I was researching for a course I was teaching on the olfactory sense and poetry. So here's the line that started the poem. So it's a line from a blog. The Arcturus T-20 drone can carry 2 small 10-pound laser-guided missiles that can turn any target into pasta sauce with the click of a mouse. And what I found very tragic about these lines was that they really seem to be celebrating killing and death. This poem is called The Smallest Drone. And yeah, there's no other information that's needed. With a belly full of metal and no neck that turns to lock you in a melting gaze, lake of Babylonian honey with its thick hypnotic rippling in the crook of your arm, it reminds you of your infant only for its weight, its familiar size, as you cradle it. Excuse me, I'm just going to get some water. So as I was writing this poem, I imagined soldiers carrying these missiles that are roughly the same weight as the weight of a baby. With a belly full of metal and no neck that turns to lock you in a melting gaze, lake of Babylonian honey with its thick hypnotic rippling in the crook of your arm, it reminds you of your infant only for its weight, its familiar size as you cradle it. This missile, its 10 pounds of chilling blindness, rises nightly to swim in your copper dreams, where your child plays with mangled beekeepers and those surviving too long, who sleep fitfully, always between 2 screams. The second one is also based on the same theme, but it's a prose poem. And this really is about how in drone warfare, the people who were doing the killing were really just doing it as the targets really didn't mean much to them. This is called Shahadzad Appears in a Drone Operator's Dream. I want to see the tray of fresh loaves magnified, but the controls are frozen. I should say that this is in the voice of a dream operator. It's not in my voice. I want to see the tray of fresh loaves magnified, but the controls are frozen and all the blue lips I've seen before end of shift come back, trembling to kiss my savior fingers. When nonplussed, I grip tighter my skinny latte. When she whispers, leave it for tea, a Maghribi recipe, I strain. She laughs like sterling silver on bone china and softly says, Maghrib means the Muslim West, and recounts the ingredients: green tea, peppermint, orange blossom, water, sugar. She pours and I drink while the sewing machine of her voice runs along the seam of life beyond life. The moment of strike inside my night stitched with night. Outside there is the same racket of buyers and sellers, a market bloated with profits I hear when I press for the explosion scene. Okay. So moving on to some other themes. This one is called Jinn Lands on Woman's Palm. So there are two characters, a jinn and a woman. A jinn has climbed the vine of henna to settle atop the wheel on my palm. King of all lost things. Gold teeth, family trees wrapped in embroidered silk, verses folded into walnut crevices, names of women who have leapt into the yawn of demons, have slain with fruit knives. Women who have sewn shut war wounds, who have cracked history in two. Do you think it's time for a ghazal?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
yes. So I'm going to read, I'll read just one, but in this book, Ghazal Cosmopolitan, I talk about the culture and craft of the ghazal. And as you know, that the ghazal has been written in English for a long time. Actually, the first ghazal in English was written in the 19th century. But in the US, we have a tradition of the English ghazal since the 1960s. And we received it via Ghalib and via Urdu, not Persian or any other language. And so Agha Shahid Ali, as you know, brought us the craft of the ghazal. He clarified to American writers and readers what the actual ghazal is, because people were writing these appropriations that were fine poems, but it was really hard to recognize the ghazalness of the ghazal. So this book actually, so it's about the craft of the ghazal, but it's more about the culture of the ghazal. So I talk about calligraphy and song and all kinds of other aesthetics that come from the same universe as the ghazal does. So I'm going to read this ghazal. It's called Broken Ghazal, and the radif is broken. And I'm going to read it in the Urdu style. So it will be slow and you'll hear some repetition. Broken Ghazal. Fix your gaze on the swinging chandelier. Everything else is broken. Fix your gaze on the swinging chandelier. Everything else is broken. A subtle perfume bursts from the debris as my silence propels, broken. This was war, and all I had for armor was an heirloom quilt of verses. This was war, and all I had for armor was an heirloom quilt of verses. As it hacked my jugular, your huntsman's axe cried, "This gazelle's broken." Look for my tapestries unraveling under the bed, the unspooled story. Look for my tapestries unraveling under the bed, the unspooled story. Sweet, covered with ants, our unlived life yet, in a nutshell, is broken. Ghalib strung verses for the sly beloved, crumbling estate, leaking roof. Ghalib strung verses for the sly beloved, crumbling estate, leaking roof. Keats sang to the elusive autumn of his life. A poet so baffles the broken. Economy, a dull house. Let's burn those tangerine candles at both ends. Economy, a dull house. Let's burn those tangerine candles at both ends. Let's be inflamed moths. You know, everything this market sells is broken. The angel by the nightstand tosses a pill, a dose of light in my final hour. The angel by the nightstand tosses a pill, a dose of light in my final hour. I shimmer for my union with the beloved when this shabby shell's broken. We must sip slowly, pause for each delicate hinge and hiccup of our song. We must sip slowly, pause for each delicate hinge and hiccup of our song? Isn't breaking up a most fragile affair? Aren't these last farewells broken? Yours was the spirit trapped in the magic lamp, yours the fate rubbed. Yours was the spirit trapped in the magic lamp, yours the fate rubbed. Zeest, how ordinary is this flash called life, when at last the spell's broken. So I'm going to read, how are we doing time-wise, Yahya? Shall I read a few more poems?
Yeah, please, please. We
Okay.
are very much, we
With
have
it.
sufficient time.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I'm going to read a poem from my latest book, my hybrid memoir, Comb. This poem is called Notes for a Combing Song. Shall we begin with a comb in an empty field? Jeweled cross, November sun, long-necked bottle of mustard oil. I'll never believe there is time enough to untangle from, tangle with our shadow selves. But let's try all the same. Bring a radio, a week's worth of the Frontier Post for drips. Bring a thermos of chai, a clear mind, some kind of winter halwa with blanched almonds, a namda rug, itchy, but as you know, its gigantic tawny maroon daisies and juicy green ferns are reminders that the universe has a big heart. It is tight-lipped, but true. Maybe you'll align shadow with shadow, cover my new periwinkle sweater with a towel before oiling and braiding my hair. Maybe you let the cats yowl in the distance, the cauliflower overcook. Fill the dialer with marbles. Let the phone ring. I'll also read a poem that has the title of my talk today as part of it. And this poem this is called Combing Song, and it's a pantoum, which is originally a Malay form that was adopted in French and then later in English. So here's the pantoum, it's called Combing Song. From lamplight and pulp of a city's map, a sculpted pigeon rising as emperor, inked, alighting on a vacuous alpine lap, song of many combs in a single mirror, a sculpted pigeon rising as emperor, returning with a copper nib, a tourmaline book, song of many combs in a single mirror, speculum of storms, echo, inner eye, and hook, returning with a copper nib, a tourmaline book, translucent and warm as eternity's milk, speculum of storms, echo, inner eye, and hook, of memory, childhood's dusty mulberry and silk, translucent and warm as eternity's milk, inked, alighting on a vacuous alpine lap of memory, childhood's dusty mulberry and silk, from lamplight and pulp of a city's map. And I'm going to finish with a few poems from Coal and Chalk. As I said in my introduction, that this book is, it published maybe 7 years ago and 8 years ago. And it's a series of autobiographical poems that I actually wrote these two books simultaneously. This is the one about Al-Andalus. It's a series of poems that revisit the whole history from the beginning, from Caliph Abdul Rahman and from the early part of Al-Andalus until the Inquisition and beyond. So I wrote these books simultaneously. This one was really a response to whatever was going on in that time. So the wars were going on. I was raising my children here in the US. And these poems really are sort of like each poem is a response to whatever was happening at that time. So again, as I said in my talk, that Coal and Chalk, Black and White, really is a sort of like a protest against this world that was losing nuance, and people are only seeing things in black and white, and just how tragic, how cruel, and and how brutal all of that is, and how we're fast becoming just less and less human. So this poem that I'm going to read is called "It's in Sleep, a Soul Will Know Itself," and it's really against it's really a rant against stereotypes. I am neither a Persian nor a Mughal miniature, no toothless gazelle, ivory hand fan, sitar tremolo, rose syrup, no tiger hunt, velvet howdah, sweltering divan of poems. I looked, but did not find myself under the desert's backlit, piercing clocks, its lexicon of loss, lures and winds of woven fragrance. I was never a black and white begum blooming out of a souffle of silk gharara, leaning on a gold cane, nor a sepia Sahab Bahadur with his shoe on the lap of a native. I never rode a motorbike through a tunnel under a river, no cigarette in my mouth, nor a niqab pressed to my nose. When I close my eyes, I am the ripped tire rolling beside a barefoot boy with a stick. I spin to his whim across a rocky, jasmine-scented hill. And this next one is called Monsoon. Why the pale mosquito net over the charpai I slept on all summer still falls liquid in my memory like sugarcane juice, or why the polonaise is like running along the small green humps of a single hill in Europe where no one dies of summer, I don't know. But when the sky growls and lightning crackles its long plastic fingers, the dusty jamun is less ghost, more tree. The city baked hollow in the sun's furnace sprouts double-shaded roses. When the rains come, I bring Socrates from the glass shelves, cut a mango in cubes to go with some milk. There is no need for Chopin, because the young Afghan from the refugee camp who made himself a wheelchair after the war plays his flute all day long to the rain's vigorous beat. And the last part is really based on my personal experience. I did see Afghan refugees who were injured after the war do these things for themselves. They would make wheelchairs for themselves. So I'm going to read two more poems. This one is called Passing Through Peshawar. And this is addressed to my son when he was very little. I know each poplar and willow of this town, how telephone wires sag with the weight of belligerent crows. The Tonga horses wait at red lights. I know afternoon shadows on slate verandas, the squeaking of a rusted seesaw, the breaking open of a walnut in a door hinge, its embossed shell, a secret cracking. The winter sun warming the mosque's marble, plums sold in crates on the roadside, corn with salt and lime, the radio at the tandoor playing filmy songs, the whiff of Lux soap. I almost say to you, look out the window, look, look, look. My library with beetle-eaten furniture, my raw silk bazaar, my ancient fort, and look, the bakery that sells pink coconut rolls. And look, there I used to get my hair cut. One turn, and my town will once again suck it into its timeless hollow. What I remember, what I know. The bus will pass all these things before you click pause on your video game. And he insists that he wasn't playing a video game, he was reading Shakespeare. So I'm going to end with this poem. It's called Notes for My Husband. I showed Yusuf to the amethyst morning when he was born. Kettle drums play 4 at a time, each tuned to play its own note. Each he would swallow whole with my vertical voice in Urdu, and watch with his cardamom eyes the slow flare of Van Gogh's sunflowers, the silk ascent to Victoria's Peak, the concave shine of mango achar. He is slender like pine nuts and keen on butter. Yasin prefers honey and tells me the sun on the front door smells like library soap. I feel the light lathering the knob as I open it. The house is filled with jazz and bagpipes, Iqbal's poems on marble construction paper. We weep in both languages, and anything round is a planet. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Anjali, just 1 minute. I'm interfering, but
It's
I
okay.
just wanted, if you go to, before you go to the question and answer session, I would like to request Anisul answered first to a few remarks, a few comments, or whatever you would like to say, sir, before we
बहुत
go
शुक-
to the question and answer session.
बहुत
Yes,
शुक्रिया
please.
बहुत शुक्रिया बहुत शुक्रिया Yahya Saab, thanks a lot, many thanks really. It's very mesmerizing, Shadab, wonderful really. Great morning you gave me, Yahya Saab. Well, it was a bouquet of a talk, I would say, where you collected flowers, blossoms from different gardens and put together. Great listening to you as it was reading you earlier. I had the good opportunity of looking at 2 of your books that you sent me very kindly, that you sent me earlier, Comb and then the Ghazal Cosmopolitan. So one wanted to read from that, and one has read from that, and also that one wanted to listen to you. When last night, when Yahya Saab sent me the link, I was so happy that to be able to see you virtually. This is the beginning of seeing you virtually, and hope we'll be able to meet soon, because I plan to
Inshallah.
come to that side once this pandemic or once the flights start. It's lyrical prose. Shadab's writing is just simple lyrical prose. So speaking after such a wonderful lyrical presentation in prose doesn't really go well with what she has said and how she has presented it. She obliterates the distinction between prose and poetry very often. And also she obliterates the distinction between forms, how the literary forms and genres mix with and how they blend together. A wonderful thing that just came to my mind is the tapestry or the kind of wall hanging which is there behind her. It brings together so many designs, and her writing and her speech and the way she presents all those things is a kind of a tapestry where so many things come from different areas and they are all strewn together, so very well woven together that you enjoy each and every thread and the needle that it moves through. So Comb was a great example of it. Let me tell you and share it with you, Shadab, that I read Comb, and it was one was very impressed by that kind of a writing. It was very new for me. It was the kind of history that you were trying to trace. I was not at all aware of what you were saying there. So when I read that, it sent me thinking as well, apart from enjoying the book, how one leads one life in a situation that you have been through, and how you have grown through years from one place to another, one culture to another, one language to another, and especially how Urdu has impacted you all through. Book was a treasure for me. And I spoke about it to some of my friends, and one of them said that give it to me for a few days and I'll return it to you. The man has never returned that book, and I don't think he's going to return it ever because he loves that book and says, so I'll acquire that book again. And it is great being able to see you today, to listen to you. So the organic development, as I said, in what you have presented. So many things you have brought. Usually when you are in such a situation, the speaker dwells upon a certain area and then picks up a particular thread of argument and goes further. What you have done, and wonderfully well, that you have drawn so many strains together that you have a full view of the total personality of an author, and how she writes and how she thinks and how she chooses her language for saying what she wants to say. Especially the ghazal and the qasida that you have written and I would say experimented with. And you refer to Agha Shahid Ali. We all have written about her and him and read his work and the way he has taught, basically, he has taught the American poets, and that um, say how he has grown and he has helped us grow. So, in fact, there was a fashion and there was a rush, especially after 1900 and say 69, when Ghalib centenary year. That was the time when things came forward and people started thinking of ghazal in English, even though Von Platten and so many people in Germany. And it's a long story that we have already spoken about that. So it was great. And then after that, Qasida, you have redefined Qasida, I would say. Because Qasida, when you list, this is a form about which you have already spoken. Qasida, we know what it is, especially in Persian and in Arabic and Urdu. Then after that, there is a long tradition of Qasida.
Right.
But the Qasida, the way you have written it in English, you have redefined with the new ideas and with new experiences that you have in hand. So Qasida is redefined. So Qasida is not, usually you associate Qasida with something which is very old in tradition of, or a traditional literary form which is so very old, is not. So people are imitating or writing ghazal today. No one looks at Qasida. So writing a Qasida or a Masnavi, a Marsiya today is something which is very courageous. So wonderful reading or listening to you on that Qasida. Yahya Sahab, don't give me time. It will go on. So I stop here because one is really just mesmerized by this talk. Shadab, wonderful to be seeing you here, to be meeting you here. It was a great talk and I really enjoyed every bit. Though it was very demanding to wake up so early in the morning. 9 is not the time for me to wake and to get ready. But this had to happen. And so I'm very many thanks to Yahya Sahab, to Riyaz Sahab, to Karim City College. I must say that no other college in India is doing what you are doing today. I must say this, and I want to say this, and I want to say it very clearly. No other college in this country is doing the way you are doing things. You have brought so many authors together, so many events you have put together. It's really great. Even the central universities, which are known for being so central within quotes, don't do this. So great for giving me this opportunity and to be able to converse with you and to see Shadab here. Wonderful. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Anjali, you may proceed to your very quick question and answer session, please.
May I just quickly express my gratitude to all of you, and especially for being up so early and making it. So I'm very honored. But I also wanted to say a very special thank you to Anisa Rahman Sahab. I'm a big fan of your work, as you know. That your work is very important to us today, and so many of us are inspired now. I'm inspired to translate, and I know that I've only done a few translations, but I'm a very hesitant translator of Urdu poetry. But it's so inspiring to have Hazaro Khwahishein in one's hand, and it's a book that really keeps, every time I read it, I learn something new. So I'm very grateful to you also for being here today. So it's great to see you.
It's really nice to hear. Let me just add to that, since you have talked of that book. A sequel to that book is coming soon.
Oh,
and Hazaro Khwahishein is going to be published for Pakistan alone. HarperCollins is going to do it for Pakistan, and a big print order has come from there. The sequel which is coming is of Nazm only, and that also starts from late 16th century to now. It is a bigger book in terms of the volume, so it takes care of all forms of Urdu poetry, starting from Quli Qutub Shah, Marsiya, Masnavi, Qasida, etc., and of course all forms of Nazm. So I'm also waiting for that, and so
very exciting.
June, it should be available by June. And to keep pace with the earlier book, which is known as Hazaro Khwahishein, I have named it Hazar Rang Shairi. And there is an alternative title. Let me see what the HarperCollins people decide. The alternative title is A Garden of All Senses, but I would rather go for Hazar Rang Shairi. So which is putting together all forms of poetry, all forms of Urdu poetry together.
What a treasure. What a treasure. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. By June,
it's out next year?
Yeah, by June it should be out.
June 2022.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
Wonderful. Mubarak.
Shukriya.
All of us are waiting, sir, for that.
Thank you, Yahya.
Anjali, please.
Thank you, Anisur sir. Thank you, Yara sir. Thank you so much, ma'am, for this enlightening session. What would I say? Because they have already said a lot about it. I'll just have to say that in your writing, I saw that there was universality, but there was a sense of localness too, which was quite inspiring because you you are on a different land, you are on a foreign land, but still you are so in touch with your culture, which is so inspiring for all of us. And looking forward for the questions. I don't think so. We have questions because there are a lot of appreciations, and there are no questions as I can see. But I have a question for you. Mm, may I, if you allow me to ask?
Sure, Anjali.
Anjali, there is a question by Ekta Dogra. You can take that. You can invite Ekta Dogra for that question. There is only one question by her.
Okay, sir. Mm, yeah, I found it. Before that, I would like to ask you that how you came about writing these classical forms. Like, what was your inspiration? Were you inspired by something? And what is your experience being in the West as a ghazal writer? So that's my question.
So the answer is that, as I was saying earlier about translations, I was very hesitant to approach the ghazal, and the reason is I grew up with the ghazal, and I know what a delicate form it is in Urdu. And I again, same thing with translation. When I read Urdu poetry and I appreciate it in Urdu, I know on how many levels I can go wrong while I'm translating it into English, because they're so different from these two languages are so different from each other. And so, I mean, the credit really goes to my teachers, my mentors, and I happen to be. I'm not Agha Shahid Ali's student, and I never really met him. But the school that I went to for my MFA had Agha Shahid Ali as a faculty member. So I mean, he taught at many places, and Warren Wilson was one of the places where he taught. So, you know, they were all his colleagues who dearly loved him. And they said, oh, you speak Urdu and this is your culture. Why don't you try a ghazal? And I said very clearly, I said that I have read American ghazals, but I know the Urdu. I know the form in its actual, original language, and I just feel that it would make me very nervous to try a ghazal. But so it was really, as Anisa Rahman Saab said, it's really lots of experiments, and and I very consciously I know that it's an appropriation, and that we're always trying to get the right effects. It's never quite the same. So that's the story of me writing my first ghazals, and this was about 10 years ago. And I wrote my thesis, my critical thesis on the American ghazal while I was an MFA student, and that got me into thinking about this. How does this work? How does this work in different languages? So I had read my first American ghazals something like 25 years ago, a long time ago. But I wrote my first ghazals only 10 years ago. And so it's really a matter of, it's really sort of like an exercise in craft and an experiment. But it's a pleasurable experiment. I enjoy it. And I'm a lifetime student of these forms. And I don't believe that there is such a thing as perfection when you're trying to,
absolutely.
when you're borrowing forms from different languages. But it does end up, I think it ends up doing something very good, which is it brings a cross-cultural dialogue and a conversation about aesthetics and a conversation about history. And so I keep learning.
Yes, of course, ma'am. There is a variety of experience in your writings as well.
So, yes, just one, Anjali, just one thing, if you can take it as a question or whatever. Since she has spoken about all these that we have been talking about, ghazal, qasida, etc., would it be, Shadab, possible for you to read out or to recite some of your Urdu ghazal, or at least one Urdu ghazal?
Yes, of course, ma'am.
That would be very much in
would
keeping
love
with
to
what you
hear.
have said.
I don't
It is a very
see
pleasant interference.
one of my big weaknesses is that I find it very difficult to memorize anything, any poetry, and poets who write in Urdu think I'm an imposter poet, because how is it possible that you don't remember, you can't recite from memory?
Ma'am, memory
So that's-
problem
That's
is
very
with
true of me
all
as
of
well.
us,
I don't remember at all.
of course.
The one ghazal which I am very drawn to is this, as you know, Amir Khusraw's Zehal Miskin Makan Taghaful, and I included the whole text in Ghazal Cosmopolitan just because, just visually seeing the text, one line in Farsi and the other line in Hindu, just looking at the text, I thought it's really like a visual, it's a visual experience. Because if we read it, we'll know what's going on. But it's such a miraculous ghazal, because it brings two completely different sensibilities together, only on the basis of sound. So I could read two lines from a couple of lines, because this is the only one that's in front of me. That's the other reason. Zihal miskin makun tagaful, durai naina banai batiyan, किताब हिजरा न दारम ऐजा न लेवका है लगाए छतियां. Is that good? And I know that my pronunciation in either language is not perfect, but that's what we do. We appropriate. But the sound, one can appreciate what Amir Khusraw was doing. Of course, he was a musician as well. So he really took sound to that next level, which is what a true poet does, is that he heard the cadence and the harmonies in two very different languages. And we as South Asians here, we hear how authentic both are. They're both authentic, because Persian is also a South Asian language. It was a very important language in India for hundreds of years. So both, for speakers of Urdu, it's such a feast.
So, ma'am, we have a question from Ekta Dogra. She asks, which form of poetry do you favor the most? And any particular reason for this inclination, if so? Which form of poetry do you favor the most?
I feel like it's often the theme that dictates which form I'll choose. So with the exception of the ghazal, because as you know, the ghazal in each couplet, each sher has its own theme.
Yes.
So a ghazal can have multiple themes. But in other poems like the Pantoum or the Qasida, or I've written sonnets, in all of those forms, I feel like it's really, when I'm thinking about a theme and I start writing, when I begin to write my notes, that's when I consider if this poem could be in a different form. Oftentimes I'm writing like free verse and I'll think, oh, I could work it into a pantoum, or I could, there's an image, a certain image that could be worked into a ghazal. So it's a hard question to answer, because I think all the forms are just tools. They're just, they give you a structure for the poem. And the heart of the poem really is, once you get into it, and oftentimes I switch, there'll be times when I actually, begin writing a form, and then I'll just, it will end up being completely different.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for patiently answering the questions.
Thank you,
I don't
Anjali.
think so we have much questions, because we all were mesmerized by your poems so much that we didn't bother to question you anything. So we are at the end of this event. And I would like to say that the feedback link is being sent in the chat box. Please submit your responses. The participants are requested to submit their responses. And before we wrap up, I hate to let you go, but we will have to wrap up anyways. Before we wrap up, I would like to request Husni Zainab to please come forward and give a vote of thanks and conclude this event. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. On the behalf of Kareem City College and the Department of English, I'd like to thank Shadab Zeest Hashmi for enlightening us a wonderful and a beautiful session. It was a matter of pride and dignity to have you among us. Ma'am. We like to thank you from the bottom of our heart for joining us. I like to thank our principal, Sir Dr. Mohammad Riyad, for always supporting us and keeping his gracious presence. Thank you. Thank you, every respected guest. Thank you, every respected professors. And thank you, all the listeners, for being a part of this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Husni Zainab. What a beautiful name you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you
बहुत
so
बहुत
much.
शुक्रिया.
Thank you so much.
So Shadab remain Shadab all through. Blessings. Wonderful.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
sir. बहुत shukriya.
बहुत शुक्रिया sir. It is going to be a very thought-provoking day today.
Of course, yes.
The beginning is such thought-provoking. It's going to be a very thought-provoking day. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Shadab.
so much, Yahya Saab. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita.
Much
What's the
gratitude.
time at your end, Shadab? What's the time at your end?
जी यहाँ 9:45 हो रहे हैं रात के.
This.
जी हाँ. Now it's 9:40 p.m.
We have a lot of beautiful remarks in the chat box for you.
Yeah, I'll try to access them. I'm not sure I've done this before on Google.
I'll send you the remarks.
Oh, that would be very nice. If you could send them to me, I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yes, आप इसको आप शेयर कर सकते हैं. इस टॉक को आप शेयर कर सकते हैं क्या? Because
yeah, बिल्कुल इस टॉक को मैं आज रात में ही शेयर करूंगा सर.
इसको शेयर करिए because
sure.
It's just worth sharing. It's worth sharing.
We have a very ardent fan of yours here, Sana. Sana, if you're here, you can talk to her. Sana is a PhD scholar from AMU. She was a teacher also and a research scholar. Sana, are you here or left?
Yes, sir.
Oh, there
Assalamu
you
alaikum,
are.
ma'am. Good morning.
Walaikum assalam. Good morning. Wonderful to have you here, Sana.
Very wonderful to listen to you in the morning today. I joined a little later, but I was just going through your interview somewhere published. So I particularly want to thank you. I want to remark on the choice of your words. I'm really pleased to see those words. How do you make use of phrases? Like I was reading A Glass of Tea, A View of the Atlas. So you are immediately taken back to that setting. It is such a picturesque choice of words. And congratulations, ma'am. It was indeed a very nice rendition today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you so much. So glad to hear from you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for letting me be a part of this.
Sure. Thank you, Shadab ma'am. बहुत शुक्रिया.
Thank you. All the best.
और सारा शुक्रिया. Thanks you.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका. खुदा हाफिज.
खुदा हाफिज.